Welcome to the Introverted Doctor podcast, dedicated to uncovering myths, mistakes, and misconceptions that hold healthcare professionals back from having better interpersonal relationships with their patients and colleagues. In each episode, we focus on different aspects of a doctor's professional life, such as communication techniques, mindset, routines, habits, and behaviors, with the goal to show how to eliminate anxiety, trip-ups, and unwelcomed results that come from ineffective communications. I'll reveal research routines and have guests in future podcasts that will help shine light on a particular topic. I'll also have takeaway summary tips that you can apply right away to start living a fuller life at work, home, and play. I'm your host, Dr. Lalit Chawla, and in this episode, I'll be talking about how to help our patients and ourselves create greater attention and focus easily so that implementing the desired change is sustainable. This is a really cool concept and it's fun to use. The show notes can be found on the website, theintroverteddoctor.com. And if you prefer to read it, you can also get the full transcript of this podcast there as well. In the last podcast, I talked about the 4 core areas in a person's life that influences change. And these 4 areas are interconnected. The first 2 make up our inner world. So the first one being our inner psychology, our values, our beliefs, our memories, imaginations, etc. And the second one being our physical body. The other 2 aspects are what make up our external world, which is our physical environment, such as the weather, the air we breathe, the physical space and the food, the nutrition we take in. And the last 4th component is the people environment, the people we interact with. And the important factor is that whatever happens in one area influences the other 3 areas. So for example, if we're starting to eat healthier, that change in our physical state can also improve our psychology, and that improves our outlook on life. However, the reverse is true as well. And we all know this. If you start eating garbage food, you'll feel less energetic, and over time you'll have decreased physical health. It's not rocket science, but it is common sense. But common sense is not always common practice. Another example is if you have a great workspace, now all of a sudden you're working in a tight, noisy place, you won't be as productive and energized long term. So it's great to identify that these 4 areas of change exist, not only in our lives, but also as clinicians. It's helpful to look to these areas as easy ways to help people change and patients change. And that's really what we're talking about, because we work with patients, and it's a great model for them to even take home so that they can reflect on what they need to change. Because we all know that one small change in one area can have a huge ripple effect in so many other areas. But the big important question is, how do we trigger that change or habit to happen so that the change occurs and is more on a consistent level? So here's the greatest problem I think we face as individuals, and also in terms of helping other people. And that is increasing a person's awareness and attention about health or lifestyle issues. Most of us are good at helping others discover or increase awareness about a health issue. I'm not going to dive into that aspect of how we help people increase their awareness in this podcast, because I'm trying to keep the podcast reasonably short. So, for example, when we've helped an individual know that they need to make an important change in their life, such as the importance of eating better, and that they need to stop drinking so much soda pop or too much alcohol, or stop smoking, or they know that they need to connect better with their partner or children, or they realize they got to stop watching so much Netflix and start exercising more or walking more. So assuming that they already have this greater level awareness, the next step is really to figure out a way to pay attention to make the daily changes possible and consistent so that change is sustainable long term. I mean, you can have all the desire you want to create a change, but if you don't know how to do it and how to increase your attention and focus, then you're going to fall off the pathway that you're trying to stay on. You may find that you're trying to implement a habit and you're psychologically committed to, but if you don't know how to remember to institute that in your daily routine on a consistent basis, you'll easily regress to old routines. How many times have you ever tried to stop consuming something that you committed to, not eating or drinking again? The next thing you knew, you're eating that chocolate bar or drinking another can of pop or coffee, or you're watching another episode on Netflix, and you find yourself unconsciously doing this. You know how it goes. You keep forgetting to drink more water. You have to pay more attention to your spouse and spend more time with them. But you get distracted and you just don't pay attention. You get home, you're busy, you're putting the garbage away, you're helping with other chores. And by the time the day is over, you're like, oh my goodness, I forgot, I'll do that tomorrow. I'll spend more time with my spouse tomorrow. I'll spend more time with my kids. And the tomorrow turns into weeks, months, and years. And then the relationships suffer. So this is where the concepts of triggers comes in so that we can implement the small changes we want by leveraging the natural cues in our environment. So what are triggers? We all have naturally inherent triggers that are around us all the time. And for simplicity's sakes, I group them into two primary categories: the physical triggers and emotional triggers. And they can be positive or negative, and they can be either conscious or unconscious. And if you look at any individual who finds it hard to keep a desired change, they don't always fail. In other words, people who want to change a behavior usually have done it, even if it's simply just for a short time period. They did it because they had a certain psychology that allowed them for it to persist, even if it was for a short term, and then they got derailed. They were in a particular emotional state or had the physical environment that supported their new change that they were trying to implement. How many people that you've heard over the years say, I quit smoking once, or I used to exercise regularly, but I stopped doing it. I used to be more attentive to my spouse and kids, but I found I had drifted from that connection. And the important question is, what state or environment were you in when you were making those desired changes? What physical and emotional triggers did you have that kept you on track? Were there any emotional or physical triggers that took you off track? So, for example, every time they coughed, they felt bad enough that they didn't want to smoke. They pulled themselves out of the social circle where other people were smoking. Those were things that kind of kept them away from wanting to smoke. But, as soon as they identified a stress or life got bad, some people resort back to smoking or that particular behavior because something triggered in them to go back. And the people who were successful, who were able to maintain that change for long term, they basically substituted that behavior or that trigger with something better. So they essentially were leveraging emotional and physical triggers to keep that change consistent. So let's talk about how we can use our physical environment to implement change. Now, this is a personal example that I'm going to share with you. Now, several years ago, I realized my energy was becoming depleted. I wasn't focused in all areas of my life the way I wanted it to be. I couldn't really keep up to my 5-year-old daughter in the park, and I knew I wanted to change the way that I was able to interact with her. And one part of that equation was that I knew I was not drinking enough water during the day, and I was drinking too much coffee and pop, and the huffing and puffing that just came from, running with her was just enough of a motivation for me to change. And frankly, I was embarrassed that I couldn't keep up to my 5-year-old. So I was emotionally and intellectually committed to making a change to increase my water intake, also instituting better exercise regimen, because I really wasn't exercising much at that time. And sometimes I would, but I would forget, So I was like, okay, I've got to change things. So one of the things was like, okay, I'm going to change the amount of water that I'm drinking. So I implemented physical triggers in my environment that would serve as memories or signposts, like little physical alarm bells, if you will. So I started off by taking a big glass of water and put it beside my night table. So then I knew when I woke up, I had to take a drink of water. Now, I'm not a big guzzler. I don't, just guzzle it back. So I took one drink, go brush my teeth, take another big drink, take a shower, take another big drink, and then change, then take another big drink. And then the next thing I knew, I had consumed about 750 to 1 liter of water before I even hit the breakfast table. Now, I want to be clear. I didn't do that right away. Initially, it was a struggle just to drink half a glass of water. But I was able to use that physical cue as a way to remember that, okay, I got this glass of water. That's what I'm going to do. Go brush my teeth, come back, boom, boom, boom. And I created that routine. Then I implemented it also at work. So every time after I was done seeing a patient, I'd go back into my office, and before writing a note, I'd take a big drink of water. I continued that throughout the day. And when I came home, as soon as I saw the door to my house, I actually envisioned it as a big water bottle. And as soon as I turned the doorknob, I knew that's a cue to drink another glass of water. So I'd go to the sink and drink another glass of water. So that was how I used a physical cues to implement more water consumption. Because if I didn't implement that, then I just wasn't paying attention. I also used the physical cues, like just when I would come home, because sometimes you know what it's like. You're working all day at work. You may be thinking about a patient and all the things that you have to do. And then I'd come in through the door and I'm not really present, with the family, and I'm just not paying attention. I'm still kind of back there at work. And I realized that, I'd be home, but I really wasn't at home. My body was there physically, but mentally I wasn't there. So I actually would use the cue once I would drive up the driveway, and once the garage door is opening, I would pause and say, okay, I got to change my state. I'm done work, refocus on what I need to do. And so that was the physical cue. So when I walk through that door, I'm going to leave whatever I needed to do back at work and be more present. And that was my physical cue to change the way I was thinking. I know many runners who actually go to bed with their shorts and t-shirts on, and they have their running shoes right at their bed. And so that when they wake up, that's just one less barrier. All they got to do is get out of bed, put their feet right in the shoes, and off they go for their morning run. And whether we're aware of it or not, we all have these physical cues that automatically clicks on a particular emotion or behavior within us. Like when we see cookies on a counter, we may have a greater tendency to grab one. Or we're around people who are fit, we feel we've got to be fit. Or when we hear people talking about negative gossip, we either get influenced by that. And all these have a huge impact on our thinking, which ultimately plays out in our behaviors. Now, let's say you want to change the way you are starting off your day, and you want to make an improvement in the way you look at the day. And so how could you do that? One way is that when you step into the shower is a physical trigger that that changes what you're going to focus on. So, for example, you could ask a couple key empowering questions as soon as you get into the shower. And this is a couple questions I ask. What can I do today that can make my day fun? Or what can I get excited about today? Or who am I going to show some appreciation today, and how? When you're brushing your teeth, you think about what are 3 things that I'm grateful for in myself, in my personal life, and my work life. Now, these are natural physical triggers that can shape the way we institute or change our thinking. As this old saying goes, what you focus on is what you will get. And if you don't choose what you're focusing on, or you don't implement that strategy in your way, then the external world, they will decide for you. The people around you will decide for you what you'll focus on. And by the way, focusing on better routines in the morning has been proven to be critical in setting your day up to win, and how you deal with the challenges and obstacles that come out the day. Because when you're in a better frame of mind, you handle things better. You can deal with it better because your gratitude overrides everything. So that is very important in terms of creating a morning routine. So something to think about. Here are 2 simple questions to ask when you're trying to create that physical trigger that will help create or anchor a new behavior. Are there any physical triggers that are hindering you to create the desired behavior that you want? So, for example, easy access to junk food, or the coffee maker is brewing in your office all the time. Are those going to be barriers for you to change what you're doing? I know for me personally, I can't have, junk food or things around. I'm just like a monkey. I'll just start eating. I just give in to temptation so easy with I have a sweet tooth, and so I know I got to remove that physical barrier around me and substitute it with better choices. So what physical triggers, are already there that in your life that you can actually use in a positive way? And remember, it can be a person too. So for example, every time I see my wife before leaving the house, I use that as a physical trigger to give her a hug, or I tell her that I'm going. And every Friday is the day I have positive conversations with my growth friends. So I actually schedule 1 hour every morning on Friday, and we do things that help elevate our conversation, our thinking. So I'm a real big believer in scheduling. So if you don't schedule things, you just won't get it done. And by the way, these questions and other questions can be found on the introverteddoctor.com website as an easy download. So just go to the introverteddoctor.com and you can get the full transcript and these questions. Now let's talk about emotional triggers. Emotional triggers also makes a huge impact on us. So say, for instance, when we see donuts or junk food or drinking too much caffeinated drinks or alcohol or sugary drinks, one reason individuals eat or gravitate to them is that it fulfills a basic human need within them, whether it's a comfort or hunger or boredom, or pick some other emotion. Hunger is generally, it's a good need, so that's important. But the negative emotional eating or drinking, that it may feel, that yummy sensation for short term, but doesn't help you in the long term, that's kind of the emotional triggers that I'm talking about. So if you wanted to, so let's see. So for instance, you may know that a donut is bad for you, but your desire to eat it at that moment to feel that yummy sensation you have will override it unless you reprogram it the way you see that donut. So the one way I help patients change their association with that donut is that when they're looking at that food, I actually, it's kind of a game I play with them. And I ask them to kind of think about things. I ask them, would you eat that donut? Or, pick whatever your favorite food is or whatever they're trying to quit eating. Would you eat that donut if it was surrounded by feces, vomit, and bugs all around them? Even if none of those things even touched it? And the response is always, they have a repulsive facial gesture, and they say, of course not. Now, imagine that same donut, and you bit into it, and the jelly that came out of it was actually like red transmission oil or blood. I mean, you can literally see people's faces change. And by the time I'm done this exercise with them, they've kind of really developed an aversion for that donut. They're like, they change. They're like, you know what? They lose their appetite, and they just don't feel good about it. So, and then if you practice and you think about this a few times, then that craving to eat that donut goes away. I mean, I had one patient who actually stopped eating these special treats that are just loaded with calories. He just loved them. And after he thought about what was in it and just visualized what it was like, it made such a powerful impression on him that he just could not eat it anymore. He kind of said, you took the joy out of eating that special treat that he would always eat every year. And but that's the power of visualization and reframing what you look at, how you're looking at something. And I use the same idea with coffee, and for people who have trouble quitting their coffee intake or they drink a lot of Coke or whatever, and I ask them, would they drink engine oil if it was put in a Starbucks cup or Tim Hortons cup? And they say no. So, next time when you're drinking coffee, think you're drinking engine oil, and that'll change their physical and emotional connection to that particular food substance. And it really works great. So you can use this technique for so many things. So this is really useful when trying to help people figure out what triggers that is emotionally charged with them, such as like emotional eating. Now, I'm totally guilty of it. I'll be honest with you. I got a sweet tooth, as I mentioned. And when I'm bored, I'll eat. Or when I'm stressed, I know that I'll use food to change my emotional state. I'm able to pause and make a better decision. I'm able to better, pay attention to that point of change because I've increased my attention and awareness about how why I'm eating that food. Here are some key trigger questions you can use to help figure out with the patient what are their emotional triggers. And once you know that, then you can create better attention moments that you can remold. Now, I put it into a very simple acronym, and it's only 4 letters long, so it's kind of easy. There are 2 positive emotional triggers and 2 negative emotional triggers. So here's the question. What triggers make me feel... So the acronym is LEAD, L-E-A-D. So the first question is, what triggers make me feel loved? So what would it be for you? For me, when I see my kids, I see my wife, I see a friend, I feel loved. E in the acronym LEAD. What triggers make me feel excited or energized? Think about what it does for you. A in the acronym. What triggers make me feel angry? And there are these emotional triggers that happen that create an angry response, but it increases our awareness and attention to it. What triggers make me feel down or depressed? So that's LEAD, L-E-A-D. Of course, you can put any positive or negative emotion in that question to help increase your attention and awareness to what is influencing your desired behavioral change. Once you've gained greater attention, then you can create greater triggers or signposts or red flags or markers in your day to implement your new change. Go to introverteddoctor.com and you can print out off a free download for additional questions. So that's really it for this podcast. It's a very simple concept, and it's a very important concept that you can use to help people implement a change or remove a change in their life. Here's a summary of today's podcast, and the show notes and the transcripts can be found at theintroverteddoctor.com. So here's the summary. Awareness and attention are both necessary to creating a change. Once a person has awareness that a change needs to happen, then they need to pay daily attention to implement that change. Number 2, when you want to help an individual make a change, identify their triggers in their life and then leverage the 2 types of triggers that exist: the physical triggers and emotional triggers. The 3rd point, know that emotional triggers are such a large force in creating a sustainable change. And if you remember the 4 core areas, see the previous podcast, you can pull from those areas to help create a trigger. So for example, having a workout buddy, a growth friend who you talk to, or remove junk food from your house. You can change your negative or disempowering self-talk, establish a routine, and start small, even if it's just a minute in the morning. It's more important to establish a trigger until it becomes part of your new ritual. For physical triggers, there are 2 simple questions to ask. Are there any physical triggers that are hindering you to create the desired behaviors you want? For example, easy access to junk food or negative gossip in the workplace or negative self-talk. And the second question is, what physical triggers are already there that you can start using or leveraging to your advantage? For emotional triggers, remember the acronym LEAD, L-E-A-D. What triggers make you feel loved, excited, angry, or depressed? You can't change something if you don't have awareness as to how you are emotionally attached to it. I hope this podcast served you in some way or served as a reminder. You certainly don't need to use all of these strategies, but pick 1 or 2 and see if it helps. If you've enjoyed listening to this podcast, please share with a friend or a colleague and subscribe to us on iTunes or Spotify or your favorite podcast app. And please don't forget to leave a rating. I know it seems like not a big thing to do, but it really does make a difference in terms of helping others find this podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Lalit Chawla, and I thank you so much for listening. Let's together make a greater, more effective community and inspire people to live their best life so that they can connect better, create greater harmony and joy, and find the magic in their life. Tell me what you liked about this podcast and what you'd like to hear in future podcasts. Have a great week.